All right. Welcome, everyone, to RPG Frequencies. If you're new to the channel, I appreciate you stopping by. And if you're a subscriber, I certainly appreciate you watching the video on YouTube, which is where this will be posted. And we're going to do something a little bit different today for my channel, which I'm super excited about. I've got the creator of Just Roll With It, Ariel or Ari Levari. So, Ari, I'd love to have you introduce yourself for a second.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me here, Alan. This is a true pleasure. And yeah, as you just said, I'm the creator of Just Roll With It and the company behind that, Paradox Port. And yeah, just real quick, my background is sort of in behavioral science and psychology. I worked in big corporations for a while, helping with various behavior change programs. And now I'm kind of taking that experience and that knowledge and applying it to the realm of personal growth and combining that with fantasy games and hopefully a whole lot of fun. So, yep.
Yeah, that's no, I appreciate that background, and that's what really intrigued me. Is as anyone who follows my channel knows, I do a lot of TTRPGs. More recently, a lot more solo RPGs, given time commitments and what have you. But yeah, I really found that aspect intriguing. How you're trying to combine those I guess disciplines, if you will. And I did want to give a quick shout out to Mr. Mean Speaks, which is where I found you. He has his own channel, and it's for those of you that are looking for like small independent TTRPGs. He's got a great channel. He's a good friend of mine, but that's where I came across Ari and Just Roll With It. So Ari, it's funny as I've played this now a bit, and I'm really excited to get into it. The way I describe it in my own words, and this is kind of part of the journaling experience for me, but in my own words, I would call it a role playing journey to positive habit formation and achieving your heroic personal goals. How do you describe what would
I
you
love
describe?
it. I mean,
Okay.
I would use very similar words. I think at the end I would tag on become the hero of your own story. That's sort of one of my framings. But yeah, absolutely. I usually say it's
Yeah.
somewhere a mix somewhere between a habit journal and a RPG and a choose your own adventure.
Yeah.
If those all had a child, that would be this book. So yeah, you're right. You're right
Cool.
on track with that definition.
Awesome. And before we get into the actual game, I wanted to make sure everyone's aware that look in terms of timing, the one of the reasons for the video now and discussing with you is you've got an upcoming Kickstarter. So maybe share just a bit of what you can in terms of just very briefly like timing of when you think it'll come out, if they can follow it, just how they can keep in contact with you on when that will launch.
Yeah, 100%. And thank you for bringing that up. The Kickstarter is we're aiming to be live in about 2 weeks, but that is still subject to some variability. I'm a fairly fresh entrepreneur trying to figure all of this out. So depending on what sort of following we're reaching, how many people are becoming aware of this, that might get pushed out a little bit. We just want to make sure that when this is launched, there's it's received well and there's enough people who really want it to make this a successful product. So that being said, there is a Kickstarter page. We'll probably put a link to that in the description, something like
Sure.
that. And then you can follow it by clicking the notify me on launch button there. You'll receive updates. And then also if you want to go to the website for the book, it's paradoxport.com. There's a way to join our newsletters as well there, and we can talk about that a little bit more later. But yeah,
Awesome. That's
for
great.
now, let's
And
dive in.
yeah, that sounds good. And last thing I would say is there are some other good interviews out there. I'll link to those below in my channel as well, because if people want just a traditional interview and your history and your background and all those types of things, I think there's some good content out there. But today, what we're going to do that hopefully is a little bit different is kind of talk through my experience on how the game's played. And I played through the Prelude, and now I've also played through about 5 days of the game itself. So for those of you that are here and watching, that's what we're going to dive into now. So to start, I mean, look, Ari, I really like how you use the Prelude as an entree, right? I mean, it's to me, it was honestly a little bit daunting as I read through the book, and there's a lot of concepts that aren't like completely intuitive, right? So I think having that prelude and that walkthrough of a few days, it really helped me get grounded a little bit more. So one, I appreciate you handling it that way, because I think there's probably a lot of different ways you could have gone.
Totally, yeah. In the first couple of iterations of this, it was just like a really long, dense piece of text up front that you had to read through before you could start journaling at all. And I just found that to be way too cumbersome, and early kind of play testing and stuff showed pretty quickly that was not the way. So I decided to pivot to this sort of format that you're talking about, where essentially what it is there are 3 days. Each day kind of introduces you a little bit to some of the mechanisms, some of the storyline within the journal, because there is sort of an active evolving story. And in short, basically you wake up in this mysterious realm, you're not really sure what's going on, and then as the days progress, those first 3 days, you learn what's going on and what you're expected to do over the upcoming journey.
Yeah. And it's funny because it wasn't, I'll be a little embarrassed to admit, but I don't mind to admit this, that at times it wasn't, because I play so many different games, solo RPG or TTRPGs, and sometimes your part of the game has concepts of some of like crafting, or things that, like, when I first started reading it, I wasn't 100% clear which part was in game and which was real life. But as I played it more, it became more apparent. Okay, obviously things like the getting a good night's rest, or some of the things we'll talk through. Honestly, at first I wasn't quite clear if that was in the game or if that was me personally, but I did learn over time that most of the concepts and things are about your personal life, and how you're creating those habits. And when the game was more about the encounters and things that we'll get into. But that was interesting.
No, it's a great call out, and that was honestly a bit of a challenge throughout writing this. Is just kind of like, there's in the beginning a sort of narrator that's telling you a little bit about what's going on, but also you have to kind of flip back and forth between, there's a narrator telling you about something in the world, and then there's a narrator telling you to also do something in your actual life, and those sort of lines get a little bit blurry. Again, I mean, I think there's room for refinement there, as I'm sure you're aware, but I hope that once you do it a couple of times, it pretty quickly becomes obvious what is where, essentially.
For sure. I mean, I think that was just it, is jumping in, and that's probably a good segue into, I mean, I like that you have 7 playable characters, and they're I would call them familiar, right? I mean, things like the fighter and even the druid and paladin. And I'm actually want to share, I picked the monk, so I'm going to share that just to maybe briefly show that image and get people kind of a little bit aligned with what some of the aspects of the game are. So let me pull that up for a second. And there we go. All right. So this is the monk, and they're all, what I thought was interesting is, I mean, like, traditionally you're used to, okay, I have my character, and oh my gosh, that character creation might take me 2 hours, and it has all these stats, and I have to do all these rolls. But to me, as I thought about it and what you're trying to do with this game and this journey, it's really more about the journey. I mean, it's great to have the classes, but to me, what spoke to me about the monk was, the callings, are like, what are you trying to do with the journal and your purpose? My thing was a little bit better balance in my life. I do a lot of work. My job keeps me super busy, 60, 70 hours a week. And so to me, like, focusing on balance, I thought, the monk was cool, but it was really simple. It's like you create your character, and you get a little bit of a skill or a benefit. And so anyway, I'll turn it over to you for a second, but I really like that aspect.
Absolutely. I think the way I sort of thought of it is the character creation is less of like, less of filling out a ton of stats and details, and more of kind of picking an archetype or a direction for your journey, right? It's like a monk. If you think about the archetype of the monk, it's someone who is, very mindful, very calm, very meditative, all of that sort of stuff. So like, that is the sort of guiding imagery that's going to be informing the direction that you're going to take. But at the same time, I did want to have a couple of like little quirks where, there's like a skill or two that you can acquire for each class, and that sort of that will influence a little bit how you play, but not drastically change the story. The main difference that actually the classes provide, which maybe we'll get into a little bit later, but that's when it comes to the magic system, which I call
Yeah,
the Arcanum. That's kind of where differences start to appear a little bit more.
for sure. And this what I found what was I guess helpful for me on the skill for the monk is I don't do much journaling. Right, I'm not a writer. I'm not super creative. So it's cool that okay with this one actually if I do spend the time to write and do my reflection and write, I get an extra XP. So it's a little bit of an incentive for me to do that on a daily basis. So
And
that was pretty cool.
that was sort of the goal, is just to give like some slight nudges in one direction. Like if you pick the monk, you're going to get more experience points if you're journaling, meditating, that sort of stuff. And if you pick the druid, you're going to get more experience points if you're like focusing more on health and wellness and sleeping and resting and things like that.
Right. Nope. I think it was very well done, and it definitely spoke to me. And as I got into the prelude, it was great that I certainly I got to meet some NPCs, and I don't want to spoil, so I don't have a lot of content I want to show on that aspect of it, but I get to learn about NPCs and start learning about, to your point, what's called the Arcanum, or like the magic and spell system. Found a scroll and had a little bit of an encounter. So I think over those 3 days, it certainly helped me get indoctrinated, right? Or and just get exposure, maybe is a better word, to some of the concepts of
Whatever
the
you
game.
prefer.
So yeah, and I want to show the map for a second. I don't think that's a super spoiler,
No,
but I
no,
did want to
not at
show a
all.
little bit about the how that looks and like how you kind of progress and what that looks like. So I think that I'll drill into a little bit more. But so yeah, you start in the top left, and the way I did this, now obviously everyone's experience will be different. I do a lot of digital. I could see people doing this right on the map and marking on the map, but I would X out in kind of a blue X up here in the top as I would finish an encounter or whatever in the map, and I'm just drawing little arrows as I progress on the map. One thing I didn't, I mean, the encounter system and the outline made it really clear. Like if as you're watching this video, if you look at B2, there's kind of a tan or brownish outline that would trigger for me that, hey, there's an encounter to be had. So that's certainly helpful. And it was apparent to me as I started looking at the map that those are encounter squares. What wasn't as intuitive to me, and we'll get into this as I look at my journaling, is I guess the glyphs on the map. I didn't immediately understand that those tie into like my Arcanum and my spell system. But once I figured that out, it was cool because it was kind of I hope that's not a spoil, but a little more of an epiphany to me, like, oh, I might want to target going to some of those early in my adventure to learn more about the magic system.
Yeah, yeah, that was sort of my goal. Like there's sort of two things I was trying to do with the map. One is like encourage some like directionality to it. So those glyphs are marking spells that which really quickly, the spells are essentially like behavioral or psychological science concepts that then you learn by having these encounters with denizens of the realm. And then you kind of get this whole magic progression system that helps you apply those to your life in some way. But anyway, going back to the idea of directionality, I wanted to have some like, okay, you're probably going to want to stick in the sort of first top left corner of the map to
Yeah.
begin with, so that you're getting more of these spells rather than immediately going somewhere totally random. So that was one idea, but also at the same time, I wanted to encourage more broad exploration. So there's some other
Yeah.
encounters, some I call them guardian encounters, which are not marked on the map, and you kind of got to just wander and see if you can find them. And those are kind of a prerequisite to being able to complete the journey. You need to have found those characters.
Yeah. No, it's been fun. I've not yet done a random encounter yet, but I've been rolling as you. So if you go to a square like A3, which doesn't have that outline, you still have the possibility of a random. I know it's not quite called that, but you might have a side
Correct.
quest Side quests.
Yeah, side quests,
That did come up.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Haven't
that's
encountered that yet. Yeah.
yeah. The idea, again, was like I didn't want to overwhelm people. I didn't want there to be something every day. So I wanted there to be some chances of like having a random thing happen, and also some times where you're not going to do anything that day. You're just going to focus on like whatever central calling it is that you're trying to pursue at that point. I didn't want to overburden people with too many things to constantly do each day.
I think that was great. And the other thing that I did have one thing I wanted to maybe call it a request, but I
Yes,
did want to
please.
show on day 3 as part of your journey. I loved the fact that you've got this sheet that goes through your routines, because I find myself, and we'll show the character or not the character sheet, the journal in a bit, so people can see a little bit of my basic journaling, but I think having like a 1 page or something that's a handout, and what I've done is just printed this, but it really helps remind me as I look at my journal what each one of these are, because I found myself constantly flipping back to day 3 to
Yeah.
figure out what those routines are. But man, if there was just a quick handout, and it might just be this, but that's what I did. I'm going to laminate that so that I have that sheet and can constantly refer back. And over time, I'll start remembering it. I'm not quite there yet, but I'm pretty close to being, oh yeah, the sword is obviously your training or your physical activity, and setting camp becomes pretty. That one probably wasn't quite as obvious to me. It was the sleep that clearly,
Yeah.
that's did you get a good night's sleep? But anyway, I liked this, and I found myself printing it so I could remind myself daily about it.
No, it's a good call out. Basically, with the final product, I'm thinking it's, my main goal is to have this physical journal be mostly what people are actually using, and then people who want
Yeah.
to use the digital version as well can. But my main idea is that you have the physical version, and then there will also be some accompanying printouts that anyone who orders it can additionally print out, and those will include sort of the quick start guide, which just has a summary of all the rules in a couple of pages, and then the Arcanum as well, which is sort of the spell-based progression system.
Yep.
Because I don't want people to have to be flipping more than is strictly necessary, because already there is, with all the different encounters, you have to constantly flip to the back of the book to find them. It's not too crazy. You do it like once or twice a day, but still, I want to limit that as much as possible and have information in front of people so that they can easily access it, whether that's on the computer or a printout. But yeah.
I think that's great. And yeah, I tend to be because of my streaming, because I don't have a big setup at home. I don't have like the big tabletop games. Like one of the games I love is League of Dungeoneers, but it's such a big footprint that for me, I do a lot of things digitally just to show people. But I think that with this game, I can really see myself using the book. I mean, I might do this for the content and to show people how to do things and maybe be helpful. But in general, I could see myself just using the journal, because once I finish a day, it's a lot easier rather than have to go to my computer and pull up the PDF. I might just carry that book around and make my notes. So I could see that being unique for me, since I don't usually do things that way.
Yeah, I mean, that was, to be honest, one of the initial visions I had is, I was trying to decide whether or not I wanted to make an app or a digital PDF or a book or whatever, and I ultimately decided I wanted to go more towards the book area. One, because there's a lot of apps out there already, and two,
Yeah.
just because as my life has progressed, I've sort of started valuing taking time to journal and reflect and do activities like that a little bit more offline, a little bit more slowly, quietly, with less distractions. So because of that, I'm personally a big fan of the hard copy sort of leather journal thing, and it just feels fun to
Absolutely.
hold in your hand and like you're more of a adventurer on a quest. But maybe
Yeah.
that's just my personal preference.
I like it. And did I see quickly that you have like bookmarks? I love the idea of having one or two of those
Yes.
to be able.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah,
Yep.
super helpful. So I wanted to get in a little bit and show off the journal. And again, my journaling is very simple, but I wanted to show a little bit about how I'm using that. So I will share my screen and show off the PDF. Now, in my case, it's a little bit more. I've done a few things just to add to it, and that again I might do differently the with the actual physical copy. but like this was my day one of the journal. And just to orient people, and this took me a little bit, again, I'm showing that either my age or a little bit of, okay, it took me a bit to figure some things out. But on the top, it took me a bit to understand that this is my level one. And you did explain it. But then I started tracking my experience by just putting like a red rectangle of how many experience points. And then I realized, and you do say in the book that I think it's 30 XP to get to level 2, but then it became a little more apparent. Okay, now I see my journey on the outside for the level system, which was very creative. You packed a ton in a very simple fashion on this, but it took me a bit to realize that.
Yeah, I wanted more of a kind of because in one day there might be multiple things that will give you experience points, right? You could do some activities that do. You could have an encounter that does things like that. So I wanted there to be an easy way just to be like, okay, I just got some XP. I'm circling the next tick on the number line, rather than having to constantly like erase a number, write it in, add something. Or add sums in general. So that was the general idea. And I will say that also translates over to the hit points, which you see as the hearts there. And that I don't think worked as well because having to color in all of those each day is a bit of a pain in the ass, to be totally transparent. So I think I'm going to replace that one with something slightly different.
I could see that. And that's, I mean, and you'll see just for anyone watching, these two boxes, I just added those to the PDF. So they're not, but that was my way of trying to, I'm a numbers guy. so having like being able to like see physically the numbers was helpful to me, but you could even do it in the hearts if you wanted, if you had whatever, but it sounds like you're doing something to make that a little, more intuitive maybe, which I think makes a ton of sense.
Totally. I mean, we are trying to launch this pretty soon, but we're going to I'm going to keep on iterating until the last moment. And, I'm getting a lot of good feedback now. So hopefully by the time it's ready, it'll be even a more polished, beautiful product.
Oh, that's awesome. And so the way I use my journal, and again, because I'm not a big journal guy, is I do simple things like, hey, I created my first day, I created my character, completed the prelude, and then I tried to track my optional, I call them activities, but I know they're called routines. And I would just say, hey, look, either I journaled here, I trained, which in my case, I've done something that, I used to work out back when I was younger. I used to work out a lot, but I've been trying to figure out how to get back into something that's going to keep me. So I'm using something called Hero's Journey, which is just a 60-day, training program. There's so many out there, but this one had a role-playing component. So I'm trying to incorporate that with just roll with it. And every day I complete that and do my workout, I'm calling that my training day and giving myself an XP as it relates to that, training aspect. So that's been great. Yeah. And then meals, I mean, again, everybody does things differently. I mean, sometimes family will go out and order pizza, but we have a product called Home Chef. So I'm trying to, like the days where we're actually meeting that and we're making a decent meal rather than pizza or whatever. It's been fun.
Also, that's another thing worth calling out about this journal in general is like, there are rules, but at the end of the day, it's really up to you to use it in whatever way lifts your life up the most. So if you want to be a little flexible and count something towards one of your objectives, do that. Like, it's your journey. This book is here to support you, not dictate your path.
100%. And I think that's one thing that, it's great that I found that as I've gotten into solo role play, I feel like on ttrpg, so when you're playing with a group, there's a real, like, I've been a dungeon master, GM, whatever you want to call it, and there is a tendency, at least for me, to be cautious because you have folks that might be rules lawyers, too strong a word, but people are very focused on rules. Like, well, wait a second, the game doesn't say that. But in solo games, I think people just inherently feel like they have more of that that ability to change things. And look, you're doing it for you. So, yes, the author might have had an idea, but if it works for you, people are a lot more, I think, open to doing that. So that's great to hear.
Totally. I mean, even if someone just uses this to like just write some random thoughts every day and not follow any of the progression at all, they just like the look of the book and like some of the images, like that's also totally fine. But if there's more there that you want to get into, it's there for you, and there's a whole kind of evolving world to explore and story arc and
Yeah,
all of that. So yeah.
that's awesome. Now, one thing, just a real quick question. I wasn't sure, and obviously I could handle it how I wanted, but I did like because I started with a certain amount of HP and I did my meal. I wasn't sure if I was just supposed to use the HP to get back if I was injured, or if I can actually go over my total hit points. I wasn't sure about that.
Yeah. No, unfortunately, at least the way the rules are written is you can only increment up to your
Makes
max
sense.
HP, and past there, it's not
Totally
doing
makes
anything
sense.
for you. Yeah.
Okay. Um,
Um,
so a couple other things on this, and I wanted to go through a couple other aspects of the journal, and then get into the Arcanum a bit, which I'm just now getting into. But like, so I'll mark my routines down here, so that was cool, and that's where I'm flipping back and forth between the images and reminding myself, oh yeah, the moon means my sleep routine. I'd never get. I might change this a bit for me. Like I don't remember the last time I got 8 hours sleep. But I might say, hey, if I get 7, that works for me. So I might change that.
totally.
Um, and then calling, I am trying to track, just highlight for now for me over here. If I am using it daily, if I forget for a day, I am trying to change that. Um, there was a cool, I'm not going to show it because that would be a little bit of a spoiler, but I did kind of have a maze encounter that was super cool for me. Like I love mazes and kind of having a timer. It was fun to have my timer out there and quickly,
Yeah.
try to see if I can get through it. So that was super fun. So
No,
I appreciate
that's
that.
that's another good call out. Just that, like, I try to, as much as I can, vary things up a little bit. Like the thing you were just
Yeah.
talking about, there's a literal maze at one
Yeah.
point that, like, a kid loses something in a maze and you have to try to solve this maze within like two-minute limit. And then there's some other random things where, like, you'll encounter some guy who will pickpocket you and you have to, like, lose a bunch of gold, or
Nice.
there's various, not to give too many spoilers, but
Yeah.
there's it's not just like roll a dice and see what happens. There's a bit more variety and some playfulness and silliness and other fun
For
stuff.
sure. And that was really fun. I enjoyed that. I haven't figured out if like some of the actual things you get, if they're in the book. I haven't looked, but or if like what I got out of the maze, I wasn't sure if I'll encounter that
Yeah.
later. But I'll figure that out. We don't need to spoil anything.
I will say most of the time, yes. There's a couple
Okay,
ones that
cool,
are just random and silly, but most of the time, if you get something, it's relevant.
awesome. That's great to hear. So I did want to get into because I think this is the one that is both the most interesting to me, and I think it's a big part of the system. But it's also been I've had to discover it along the way, and that's the Arcanum. I did want to talk a
Yeah.
bit about that because that, like I said, one is new for me, and two, um, it's not that it's not intuitive, but it was the most like it's not like a typical. I got my spell book and I learned 3 spells, and I level up and I
Yeah.
learn these spells. So I've been having fun trying to figure out like how does it really work. And what I've done so far, just to explain to the group and you from my playthrough experience, is I learned the spell of purpose, and that was part of, I think I was just fortunate that was part of the prelude, and maybe not everyone goes through the prelude, but I learned that. And then I also, on one of my experiences and encounters, I learned the spell of implementation intentions. So I kind of marked those. So, and I know there's probably places on my character sheet that I could mark that too. I just put a little green box. But then as I've gotten into this, I've been trying to look at my actual, I guess, the book itself and learn like, again, I'll show you what I've done, but I actually went in, and so for the spell of implementation intentions, I tried to summarize that myself. So that was part of I guess, my journey, and then I started learning that, oh wait, these glyphs, if you will, actually mean something on the map. So I started putting it together as I played through it, and so yeah, so I started. I haven't progressed much further than that, but I at least started kind of saying, hey, what does it mean to me, by reading the scroll of implementation intentions, and just really simply say, hey, this is what it means to me.
Totally. That's really all you're supposed to do. Like, it's
Cool.
just a way for you to, because real quick for the
Yeah.
audience, at the back of the book there's these spell scrolls, which are basically short little summaries of like a page and a half long of these concepts, which are based in psychology or behavioral science. And once you read that, I just want to encourage you to just think about it for a second and then write a sentence or two about what it means to you. The idea there just
Cool.
being that, like, so much of the information we consume goes in one ear and out the other. And I just wanted to encourage people to take a quick moment and try to instill that knowledge in a way that lasts a little bit longer. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, it was great. And then the scroll of purpose, I did a little bit. We don't have to read everything I did, but I did. So in that case, I went into my Arcanum, and I kind of wrote to me again. What are the core principles to me? And they might be a little different to everyone. Everyone's going to look at it a little bit different. But I
Yep.
kind of wrote down what it meant to me. And then it was interesting with the scroll of purpose. I liked the idea of how are you? It is about the journey and not just about, hey, you're going to overcome the darkness, whatever that is at the end of this, but it is more about the journey. And so I tried to describe for me, like, what are my feelings and why am I interested in having more balance? And to me, that's being more present with my family and having more, not just focus on work. So I tried to kind of add to this what made sense to me. And what's remaining for me, I think, is as I get into maybe some of those challenges where maybe I am working too much during a week for my specific journey. How do I step back and how do I kind of use this construct to ground myself again and say, okay, you have the ability to take a 15-minute break or whatever and go spend some time with your kids or my wife. So that's how I'm trying to use it.
No, that amazing, man. It seems like you're right on track. That's my hope, is just that people kind of mess around with these a little bit and try to learn the concept and just see in which ways it could fit into their lives. Because the core of the system isn't really to prescribe a path. And I realize that, like, with the numbers and the kind of progression looking system, it gives that illusion. And to be
Okay.
honest, in later versions, I've removed the numbers because that
Okay.
ultimately wasn't necessary. Um, but at the end of the day, I just want people to learn these concepts, try them out in their life a bit, see what sticks, see what improves their quality of life or their ability to follow through on goals or whatever it might be, and then keep that going forward
Yeah.
for however long or in whatever ways you might want.
No, that's the more I read, the more I looked at it, it did become apparent. I mean, like I said, I'm one of those guys. It's probably like, wait a second, it's by numbers. I have to go by the numbers, which you do. I mean,
Yes.
and you make it clear that hey, you can jump around, but you do have to, as I understand it, and I think it even says this at the bottom. But in order to confront the darkness, which is in general, I think the big whatever ending boss, whatever you want to call it, but you do have to complete this. Doesn't have to be in order, but you have to kind of get through this arcanum for your class to get there, correct? Or-
Yes.
Okay.
And that is another thing. There's a couple of things since this last version, which you got your hands on, which is at
Mhm.
this point a month and a half old or something, that
Yep.
we have edited, and that is one of them. Where now all you need to do is, you don't need to have completed all of these challenges. You just
Okay.
need to have at least located the spells and learned them, and tried a couple of challenges.
Okay.
So it's become a little bit less strict because after talking to a lot of different people, some of them, like, would find a spell or something, or, a principle, and just be like, I just don't really see the utility in this. I don't want to apply that to my life. Does that
Sure.
mean I can't finish the journey? And I was like, no, that doesn't
Got it.
make sense. Like, I want you to be learning and experimenting, not following my rigid dictates of what you need to do to be
Cool.
better in life. So yeah,
No,
we
no,
I've
that's great.
I've made systems more flexible a little bit to allow for different play styles now.
And what do you think? Like in my mind, I could see, like I was thinking about, quote unquote replayability, but I could see myself saying, hey, I've focused on one aspect of which again for me right now is balance, but maybe I do lean in more heavily after I'm through this, which may be a 60-day, 90-day, I don't know yet, I guess. But once I get through that, I could see myself trying to reapply this and say, look, I really do want to get back into, and have more of a focus on, say, working out. Like I do want to be healthier. And so I do feel like there's replayability, for lack of a better word, with this and using this multiple times. Is that your intention or?
Yeah, It is, and it's a little complicated at the same time because, the map is built such that it has a limited number of squares, and as you move
Yeah.
through them, you're gonna find the same things, right? Those are not infinite.
Fair.
That being said, depending on like how quickly you progress through the map, maybe you'll only hit half the squares in a given playthrough, and then there is a whole other half of the realm that you have yet to explore. Um, so I'll pause there and then say, on top of that, that my long-term vision is to have this be a much more evolving, fluid product where over time, assuming that this launch is successful and that there's some general interest in it, that I will develop new maps. And that those maps will have different storylines and associated encounters that all sort of happen within the same world.
Yeah.
And that I think that's the only way to really make it super replayable, because I mean you totally can replay it, and as you hinted at, you could pick a different character. So let's say you want to work on physical attributes, you could pick the fighter, and you could still be tracking all of your things, journaling, gaining XP, but you would encounter a lot of the same NPCs, characters, etc. So yeah.
Well, and that's one thing. It's funny, as I thought about where you might be going. What I wanted to ask you about is, it seemed to me like there could be, like, again, I'm going back to I guess my traditional role playing roots, if you will, but I could see you making pre-made adventures that might focus on, hey, if you want to do strength, here's an adventure module for you. If you want to do weight loss, if you want to focus on your mental health, whatever, I could see, like,
100%.
potentially that'd be really cool.
To be honest, that was initially my vision, was to actually have like kind of like 4 general archetypes, like earth, air, fire, water, that are like intellect, strength, etc., etc. But then that just ended up being way too much work with like different sort of narratives and branches for each of those. So I sort of was like, I'm going to leave it up to the person to pick what they want to focus on, and then maybe down the road I can release some add-on content that tailors it to a specific desire. But I will just say one thing on related to that is that the side quests, which you said you haven't yet encountered,
not yet.
I do think that I want to for sure create some side quest decks, some decks of cards
Cool.
that are class specific, right? So that if you're picking the fighter and you're more focused on physical things, the side quest deck that you pick from would be more physical focused. And if you're picking the druid, it would be more health and wealth, or health and mental health and all of that sort of stuff.
Got it.
So that is one thing that I'm actively working on. I don't know if that will be a part of this upcoming Kickstarter launch yet.
Sure.
That would probably be like a stretch goal, and that's something we can get to a little bit later. But yeah,
one thing I thought would be interesting, and again, this could be like a real future down the road if you even have an interest in it. But I thought, gosh, there's a you hit on it. I think it was the scroll of spell purpose, or is that right? Or I think that's what it was. But it got me thinking about the idea of when you have other people on the journey with you, it both motivates you. And, like when you're working out, when I used to work out back in the day, it was easier to have a partner, because when I didn't want to go to the gym that day, I was like, I don't want to let down my friend. So I just wonder, over time, could you is there any possibility to do it a multiplayer where you're doing this with a group of friends or something? I just thought that might be interesting at some point.
Yeah, I mean, you're totally right, and that is also kind of where my heart is at. Like, at the end of the day, I love the solo journaling stuff. I think it's great and important, but my real passion is in bringing people together and building community and helping people pursue their goals through the kind of uplifting effect of doing it with others. So totally, I think the first step towards that is probably going to be that there will be a Discord channel that launches with the Kickstarter as well.
Cool.
And my kind of vision there is to have different rooms, different chats for like people who are all trying to pursue a similar thing. So like all the fighters who are trying to pursue physical things, all the rogues who are trying to pursue entrepreneurship and wealth, like something like that, where they can share how they're using the journal to help them pursue those given objectives.
I think that's awesome, and look, I've really enjoyed it. It's been fun. I plan to continue and stay on my journey. I'm gonna try to keep this up, and it hasn't really been a chore. It's been fun. It's been I've really enjoyed it, and I'm glad I've found something that is getting me more interested in keeping my workout going. But in general, and one thing I think that it was lost on me to begin with, but I was really like, gosh, if I have to journal for an hour a day, hour and a half, it's interesting, but I don't feel like I can commit that much time to it. But then as I've gotten into it, for me at least, and everyone might approach this differently, but it's only maybe 15 minutes, if that, to go in, decide which square I want to go on, do my encounter, and then devote that amount of time to doing my journal. So it hasn't been an enormous commitment. And in those days where I do want to spend maybe more time on my arcanum and spells, I'll take the weekend where I have a little more time and I can say, okay, on a Saturday, maybe I try to dig into that a little bit more. So it's not as daunting now. So,
Yeah, that was my hope. My hope was like on the average day, it's really gonna take 5-10 minutes,
cool.
because 5-10 minutes of just like opening the book, writing a
Yeah.
little bit, checking some XP values, and maybe rolling a dice to
Yeah.
determine an outcome of an encounter. But then, yes, exactly. Other days, if you want to put a little bit more effort into it, you want to write a little bit longer, or you want to learn a spell and read a spell scroll and then figure out how you want to apply that to your life, that's going to take more time. And I think you're spot on in
Cool.
using weekends or some more free time for that. That's exactly what I did myself and what I envisioned for others.
Awesome. Well, I mean, look, I'm really one. I've had a ton of fun already, and I'm really excited to continue on the journey. And unless there are aspects that I haven't covered, and maybe we can wrap a little bit more about the upcoming Kickstarter, where to find you type things. But is there anything I didn't cover that you'd like to dive into a little bit more before we kind of get into the Kickstarter and wrap?
No, I mean, I think we
Cool.
covered most of the bases. I mean, I think if people are interested in learning more about it and seeing how it actually looks and feels, I'm going to be releasing more videos about that. I'm going to be doing kind
Cool.
of a more active playthrough myself, showing people
Awesome.
how I use it, and that's going to be coming to social media, TikTok, Instagram, that sort of stuff. So keep an
Great.
eye out for that. Um, and yeah, I mean, just thank you so
Cool.
much, Alan, for having me on here. This is it's I'm just super glad we met and that you're really
Yeah.
enjoying this, and it brings me a lot of happiness to see people using it, and I hope we can get the word out to more people as this continues to build.
Absolutely. No, I'm so glad I found it. And do you have not to put you on the spot with a Kickstarter, but do you have any ideas just to give people a little sense of where tiers be based on? Well, you're going to have a soft cover journal, a hardcover, like anything you can share or want to share at this point about what might be involved in the Kickstarter?
Totally. Yeah. I think that's a great call out. The tiers are honestly pretty simple at this point. The lowest tier just being the digital PDF. The digital PDF is going to be included with all the other tiers as
Cool.
well. But then from there, it's largely quantity based. There's like one journal, two journal, three journal, and the prices sort of compress as you order more of them. But then with each additional tier and more journals, there's an extra added perk, whether it be like a conversation with me on how to apply this to your life, and sort of like a
Cool.
quick half-hour coaching session on whatever it is you're trying to work through and how this book can help you do that.
Nice.
So there's some additional things, and going up to like the highest level, you get to work with me to create one of the encounters in the book. So we're gonna swap out one of them and do something that feels relevant to you and swap that in.
Cool.
But yeah, just to be totally straightforward, as this is my first time creating a product and launching it into the world, I didn't want to overcomplicate it with too many physical add-ons and things that could get messed up in the manufacturing process. I really wanted just to focus on getting one high quality product into the hands of people, and then as I get confidence on that, build towards more products.
I think that's smart. I think, at least for me, and I've backed, I don't know, going on 40 Kickstarters. I'm not like an expert, but at the same time, I do feel like those that have gone really well stick to kind of the basics. And, they have maybe a few stretch goals add-ons, but it's not like everything's behind the stretch goal. And they try to do
Yeah.
a basic, let's get this right first. So for what it's worth, I think that makes a lot of sense to me on how you're approaching it. So cool.
One of I guess one thing worth calling out, as I just want to be totally transparent with all of my audience, is that currently in this version of the book, the art is largely AI based. And one of the primary stretch goals, the first stretch goal that we're hoping to meet, is to raise some additional funds to create another edition that does have art done by real artists, at least in some of the book, or maybe all of it, depending on how much. But to be honest, for this version, working with a very low budget, and it's got something like 150 plus images in it, that ended up being prohibitively expensive to hire an artist to do. And I wanted to prioritize getting this into the hands of people who it might benefit, rather than driving myself a goal that I couldn't meet.
No, I really appreciate you raising that one, because I do know it can be a polarizing topic. And for me, I understand for like this type of situation, completely understand going that route to begin with. And the idea being, if you can, over time, go the route of traditional, I guess, artwork, I think that's great. But I really appreciate you being transparent, because for somebody like me, like, I appreciate the transparency. It's certainly not a negative for me. I'm glad that you're interested in maybe expanding or changing that over time. But I think it's great that you're being upfront about that.
I totally understand if that is a deal breaker for people. I'm happy to talk it through with others. But it's a complicated issue. I'm not gonna say I figured it out, but I'm aware of that. I'm trying to work on it, and I think that's all I can do at this point in time.
Cool. So I guess you've already shared some of this, but just by way of wrap up, and I'll drop a bunch of links in the description. But remind us, like, where should people reach out to you, find you, like website, email, anything you want to shout out before we leave?
So the Kickstarter is coming. The link for that right now is long, so we'll just put that in description. But you can hit the notify me on launch button to follow us there. Then there's Instagram and TikTok. Instagram is more built out at this point in time. TikTok I just started recently, but those are both paradox.port. And you can find me there. I'm trying to do a bunch of funny sketch videos about different ways that these ideas can be incorporated into your life, and some sort of point of view, playing your life as a RPG type game. Hopefully they're funny. I'm very new to all of this stuff, so I apologize if I'm crashing and burning, but I'll learn. I'll figure it out. And other than that, there's the website, which is paradoxport.com. And there you'll find some additional resources. There's I built this sort of map for life that's kind of got some different focus areas for your life, and you can print it out and color in different sort of regions and sections to show which areas of life you're focusing on. If that sounds fun at all, if you want to put that on your wall, you can download that for free, and that's just a way to start building up some emails that then I can notify about Just Roll with it as well. So would love if you wanted to give me your email so you can stay up to date on all of this. That was you, the audience more broadly. I have yours already. And then also, if you want to reach out to me directly, I'm happy to talk. I'm still trying to get as much feedback on this as possible. So my email, I can also throw in the description, but it's ari@paradoxport.com, and feel free to reach out.
Awesome. That sounds great. I mean, it was a pleasure talking with you, Ari, and I'm really enjoying the game, and I look forward to continuing the journey. But again, thanks so much for joining me today. And I hope if you all like this content, please, like, comment on the video. If you have questions for Ari, I mean, he's given you places to reach out to him directly. Feel free to comment on the video, and I'll respond as I can as well. So thanks again. And appreciate everyone stopping by. Until next time. Thanks again, Ari.
Thank you, Alan. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely.